Welcome back to Speaking with Confidence. The podcast helps you build the soft skills that lead to real results. Communication, storytelling, public speaking, and showing up with confidence in every conversation that counts. I'm Tim Newman, a recovering college professor turned communication coach, and I'm thrilled to guide you on a journey to becoming a powerful communicator. For 81 episodes, I have talked about the importance of clear communication. But what if I told you miscommunication isn't always the enemy? That's actually the fuel behind viral memes, comedy routines, and even tough negotiations. Research and comedy experts note that many of the most effective jokes hinge on the audience briefly misinterpreting the setup before the reveal. And that small gap in understanding is what makes the punchline land. We've all been told that clarity is everything, especially in professional settings where miscommunication is treated as a problem to eliminate. And while that advice has its place, not all miscommunication is harmless. If it is handled carelessly, it can backfire or even cause offense. But when used with intention, leaving just enough room for your interpretation can work in your favor. Comedians play with timing. Negotiators protect their leverage, and you can use it too. The question is how this works in practice, because sometimes the smallest bit of confusion can command massive attention. In today's attention economy, some of the most viral moments don't come from perfectly polished content at all. They come from short, ambiguous clips or images that leave people asking, what exactly is going on here? It's that unanswered question that creates a sense of curiosity, holding attention longer than a fully explained post ever could. Media analysts point out that the same effect drives viral memes and much of the so-called debunking turn online, where posts that lack context or appear misleading spark waves of commentary, fact-checking, and resharing. It's the very structure of ambiguity that fuels this interaction. Meme culture thrives on this open space. Take popular image formats like distracted boyfriend or woman yelling at cat by themselves. They don't provide captions or instructions. Instead, they invite audiences to project their own interpretations, remix them endlessly, and pass them along. And this really ties into episode 80, where I talk about where people get stories from. Research and media analysts suggest that when content remains partially specified, people are more likely to contribute their own meaning, whether that's writing captions, debating explanations, or using the template in creative new contexts. That participatory loop is what keeps these memes in circulation far longer than content whose meaning is locked down right from the start. This same principle appears in strategy. Marketing research notes that brands sometimes post playful or open-ended messages not to clarify, but to provoke discussion. And when a post leaves room for multiple interpretations, audiences fill in the blanks, tag friends, and effectively co-create the conversation around the brand. Analysts highlight cases where deliberately ambiguous or provocative campaigns drew significant attention precisely because they resisted tidy explanations, transforming followers into active participants. And comedy operates on very similar mechanics. Researchers in humor and communication explain that many jokes hinge on misunderstanding. The setup steers the audience toward one interpretation, only for the punchline to reveal another. It's that sudden shift. The realization you guessed wrong is what produces the laugh. If everything were perfectly transparent from the start, there would be no surprise to release. And studies on curiosity and what scholars call epistemic emotions support this. Partial information, whether it sparks surprise, confusion, or puzzlement, nudges us to investigate and stay engaged. In other words, ambiguity is not just tolerated, it drives an exploration and it creates energy. And while it explains why memes spread and jokes land, the same logic turns out to be incredibly useful in situations that carry much higher stakes. In business, leaders and organizations often turn to what communication scholars call strategic ambiguity. Rather than laying out every detail in concrete terms, they frame goals or roles in ways that leave room for interpretation. Research in organizational communication shows that this can be powerful. Vague, value-forward language often attracts different kinds of participants because it allows people to imagine themselves as a fit. In hiring, for example, instead of specifying line-by-line technical requirements, companies sometimes emphasize qualities like creativity or adaptability. And according to Eisenberg's work on ambiguity as a strategy, this deliberate openness helps align broad groups of people around shared values without locking the organization into one rigid definition of success. And negotiation operates on a similar principle. LinkedIn's research into common missteps in negotiations highlights ambiguous phrases such as, "we'll need this soon," can frustrate communication if left unmanaged. But those same phrases can also be used purposely to keep timelines flexible and to maintain leverage. Negotiators who avoid overcommitting too early preserve room to maneuver while still signaling urgency. The difference lies in whether ambiguity is employed haphazardly or strategically. Marketing strategists point out that aspirational language works in much the same way. Open-ended slogans and campaigns that suggest ideas without nailing them down give audiences the space to personalize the message. And content experts studying the attention economy argue that phrases like innovative, transformative, or revolutionary capture attention precisely because they resist strict definitions. Rather than limiting interpretation, they invite participation, allowing each audience member to attach their own significance. Leaders also talk about the cone of possibility. This approach starts with broad, flexible directives that can adapt to shifting circumstances while steadily narrowing toward specific goals. Research on uncertainty and strategy suggests this method encourages more creative solutions. By not dictating the path in advance, managers open space for innovation that might otherwise be shut down by rigid instructions. And ambiguity isn't confined only to organizational life. In fact, understanding how it can shape perception, create tension, and hold attention is crucial to fields far beyond business or leadership. Some professions use misunderstanding not as an obstacle, but as a central tool, turning the risk of misinterpretation into a deliberate technique for impact. Comedy shows how misunderstanding can be sharpened into a craft. Watch any top comedian and you'll notice they don't just throw out punchlines. They create moments of confusion on purpose. When an audience briefly believes one premise, only to have it overturned, the resulting surprise drives the laugh. Industry writers and practitioners point out that our brains light up at the shift because humor often lands not when things make sense, but when they are misread and then reframed. A classic example of this is from Abbott and Costello with their Who's on First routine. Sitcoms provide some of the clearest evidence. Observers in the comedy writing community note that misunderstanding is one of the oldest and most reliable engines for situational humor. Characters in shows like Friends or The Office often earn laughs by taking a line too literally or missing an obvious cue. Those mistakes are not sloppy writing. They are intentional structures designed to prolong tension till the release of recognition. Classic figures like Charlie Chaplin or Rowan Atkinson's Mr. Bean built entire acts on similar principles, playing with physical cues that suggest one outcome before subverting it with another. Timing plays a huge role, and both performers and researchers agree on its importance. Comedians stretch the setup so the audience leans into one assumption, then deliver the twist at just the right beat. Pauses and silence can be as carefully placed as words. Experts highlight timing, empathy for an audience thinks, and precision of wording as essential tools. Each helps to guide misinterpretation just far enough for the revelation to feel sharp without crossing into confusion that breaks the joke completely. There's also the matter of memory. Recent communication research on confusion and frustration shows that unresolved moments can prompt deeper engagement because the audience works harder to make sense of what's unfinished. That's why a paradoxical line or half-answered setup can echo in someone's mind long after the show ends. And by leaving small gaps open, comedians increase the odds that lines are remembered, repeated, and retold. Improvisers and sketch writers use the same playbook. Rather than fixing the misunderstanding, they allow it to grow, fueling escalation. Analysts of hit comedy sketches consistently note that the funniest moments are often built not on clever wordplay alone, but on shared misreadings that spin further out of control. And all of this shows that misunderstanding handled with precision isn't an accident at all. It's a deliberate strategy. And as we pull the lens back from comedy, the broader point becomes clear. How we use miscommunication can determine whether it undermines a message or makes it unforgettable. Strategic miscommunication isn't careless. It's intentional. And skilled communicators know when to leave space that draws people in and when to lock down the details. But it does come with limits. As communication scholars like John Tomlinson note, ambiguity that relies on stereotypes or targets protected groups can cause real harm, with consequences that extend far beyond a failed joke or campaign. If you want to test this approach, research on confusion and ambiguity suggests a simple rule. Open with a curiosity gap or partial premise to spark engagement. Then resolve it when appropriate, while always respecting your audience's norms. Remember, we're looking for progress, not perfection. That's all for today. Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to get your free ebook, The Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. You can also register for the Formula for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.